Okay, people, welcome back. We're going to start a tutorial where we're going to create a skull together. If at any point during this tutorial you need to go back, just make sure you pause the video, go back, and just listen to what I said again. I'll try and move fairly slowly, but just try to follow along as closely as possible. And you have room for interpretation here as far as creativity goes. So we're going to create a new document. This document is just going to be 8.5 by 11, standard paper size, letter paper size. My computer is a little bit slow because I'm running all these programs. We're going to name our document. We're going to name it Skull Exercise. And underscore our name. This is going to be a skull exercise. And you're going to put your name. So you can just put your last name and your first initial. Actually, put your first name and last name. So I'm just going to put Christine Bailey, which is my first and last name. And we're going to keep all the default settings. So no bleed, CMYK color, 8.5 by 11, portrait, and only one artboard. So we're going to hit create. And then hopefully you just watched the introductory video, so you have some idea of what we're going to be working with here. So in order to create a skull, those of you who have taken drawing classes probably know that the first shape that you would start with when you're creating a skull is a circle. So we're going to choose our ellipse tool. And if you don't already have it, you're going to go to where there's the rectangle tool, and you're going to click and hold, and then you're going to choose the ellipse tool. So once we have the ellipse tool, we want to create a perfect circle. So we're going to hold down the shift key, and we're going to click and drag, and we're going to create that circle. Okay, so this is what you should have. I'm going to give you little checks as to when you should kind of check your artboard and see that it looks the same as mine. So you should have a circle on it, and you want it to be in like the top half because we have to leave room for the jaw. Okay, so the next shape that we're going to use to create the jaw would be a rectangle. Luckily, we actually have this rounded rectangle tool, which allows us to create a more rounded jaw. So I'm going to go ahead and click and draw my rectangle. And I might need to adjust it afterwards. So I've drawn my rectangle. I'm going to choose my selection tool, and I'm going to move it so that it's centered. Actually, I'm going to do one better than that. So I might want to move it up a little bit, but I'm going to select both of my shapes, and I want to make sure that they're centered. Now, obviously, not every skull is perfect, so if you don't want to make your skull perfect, that's okay too. But you're going to go up here, and on your control bar, when you have both these selected, you'll notice that you have all of these tools right here. And what those are your align tools. You can also find them in your align panel. And if you remember, any panels that are not already available on your right hand side, you can find them under window. So you can click on window and you can choose your align panel, but it's already checked off because I have it open over here. So those same shortcuts are up here, and you'll notice that there's one that looks like a couple shapes stacked on top of each other with a line through the middle. That means that they're going to align the shapes to the center point. So we want to make sure that we're aligning it to each other. So right now it actually is going to align them to the artboard. So this option right here, you'll notice that you can select to align it to selection, whichever object you selected first, it will align it to that, or align to key object, or align to artboard. So we're just going to choose align to, actually we'll just leave it as align to artboard because that's okay. We can have it in the center of our artboard. And then you're going to click that center point, and what's going to happen is it's going to automatically center. Now these are our center points. it's going to automatically center those with each other and within the artboard. So they're horizontally centered. So once we have that, obviously we would want to combine these two shapes, because right now we have two separate shapes and we want to combine them. So hopefully you remember which tool we're going to be using for that. We're going to be using the dead snowman, also known as the shape builder tool. And we're going to select both of our objects by clicking and dragging over top of them with our selection tool. Then we're going to choose the shape builder tool, which is the dead snowman, and you're going to draw that line right through the middle. And so that gives you more or less a skull shape. So you might remember that when you choose the direct selection tool, you can select specific points. So my chin, I would like it to be a little bit more curved. So what I'm doing is I'm going to choose the direct selection tool, and I'm going to just select the bottom half here so that I can get those little circles that are going to allow me to bring that in a little bit more and make it a little bit more curved. All right, so that way I can have a little bit more of a curved of a jaw. Okay. So the next thing we're going to create is going to be our circles for our eyes. So you're going to go back to the ellipse tool, and these don't have to be perfect circles. They're going to almost be a little bit more like ovals. So I'm going to create one, and I want to duplicate this. So there's a couple ways I can do that. So I'll make sure that's selected with my selection tool, and I can either hit Command C, Command V, and what that'll do is it'll paste it right into the center of my document. But there's actually a more efficient way to do that. So when you have something selected and you want to make a duplication of it, you can actually hold down your Option key, and you'll notice that when I hold down my Option key and I roll my cursor over the edge of my object, it's got two arrows. And what that means is that if I click and drag, I'm actually going to duplicate that object. Now, why this is more efficient is actually because as I click and drag, I can move that wherever I want. I can actually hold down the Shift key and it aligns it directly in line with my other one. So this is nice because I don't have to move it and worry about it becoming not being in line with it, and it's also faster. For me to Control C, Control V, and then have to move it, it's just adding one more step to my process. So holding Alt and dragging is going to allow you to quickly duplicate something and place it wherever you want. So I'm going to select both these, and I'm actually going to use the arrows on my keyboard and just move these over so that they're centered, or at least close to centered. They don't have to be perfect. So now I have my eyes. Now, if we're going to create a skull nose, they actually usually look like two teardrops, but for this exercise, we're just going to create it using a triangle. Now, there are two ways that we can create a triangle. We can either use the polygon tool or we can use the star tool, but both of them will create a triangle, because if you remember, when we choose the polygon tool and we click on it, you actually can choose the number of sides that you want. So in this case, because a triangle only has 3 sides, we're going to choose 3 and we're going to hit OK. Now this is going to create our triangle for us. And the problem with this is that it's an equilateral triangle. So this is normally the part where I say, how could we fix that? But I also have to give you the answer because you guys aren't here to answer me. So the answer is that we take our selection tool, which allows us to scale things, and we click on the top part and we drag it up to make it a little bit longer. Okay, so now we've got our nice triangle nose. Move it over so it's between my two eyes. Now this doesn't quite look like a skull nose. So in order to make it look like a skull nose, we're gonna have to bring a point up here. Okay. So what we could do is we could actually take this shape and we could duplicate it by holding down our Option. And we can place it kind of in the center. Whoops, I think I messed up. Hold down the Option key, click and drag, and place it where we want it. Okay, so maybe I want my nose to go up this far. So I'm gonna layer that triangle on top of that other triangle. Now, this is where things get tricky, because what we want to do is we actually want to cut this top part of our triangle out of this triangle. In order to do that, we actually have a special panel that's called the Pathfinder tool. Okay, so if we go to Window and we choose Pathfinder, it's going to open up this panel for us, which I didn't already have opened. And there's a couple of different what we call shape modes. Okay, so if I select both of these, I'm going to show you how these shape modes work. If you select both of them, the first shape mode is called Unite. And this actually does something, this is actually similar to the Shape Builder tool, except that with any of these shape modes, you can only use 2 shapes in order to use a shape mode. So we could put these two together with the Shape Builder tool, but we could also put them together with the Unite tool. So you can click on that and it's going to unite those 2 shapes. I'm going to hit Command Z to go back. Let's undo. And the next shape mode is minus front. So when I click on that, what happens is it subtracts that front shape, which is our second triangle, from our back shape, which is actually what we want. But I'm going to show you the other shape mode. So I'm going to hit Command Z. The next one is intersect, which means that any parts that are intersecting one another are going to remain while the rest of the shape disappears. So if I click on that, I'm just going to end up with a little itty bitty triangle. And then the last one is exclude, which means that when I click on it, everything that is overlapping will disappear and the part that isn't overlapping will remain. So when I click on that, it creates this weird shape with this outside bit, but this is actually empty. Okay, so obviously we want the second option, which is minus front. So we're going to choose that and we're going to end up with this. Now, our nose still isn't exactly what we want it to look like for a skull nose. What we want is we want our edges to be a little bit more rounded. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the direct selection tool. And I actually just want, I'm going to just select these corners and I'm going to make that rounded. And I'm going to do them each individually. And then I'm going to select this one and I'm going to make that rounded too. And I'm going to make my top one rounded. So this is kind of starting to look a little bit more like a skull nose. Now it's not going to look perfect. These, I feel like this could be like a little bit thinner, but I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. No. Okay. So there's our nose. The next thing we want to create is a mouth. So what we need for that is teeth. We're going to use the rounded rectangle tool. And you're going to just create a long tooth. So this is actually going to be both our top and bottom tooth. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut them in half after we've created them. So you're going to create one long tooth. Then you're going to hold down your Option key and duplicate them. And it's okay if they're uneven because I'm going to show you a way to quickly distribute and align them. So you can select all of your teeth, and we're going to do a lot of crazy stuff to our selection. So the first thing you're going to do is we're going to go back up to those align shortcuts or our align panel, and we're going to center these horizontally However, remember we had it aligning to our artboard. So this is a situation where we really wanted to align it to a selection. So if we align it to the artboard, it's going to go a little bit haywire. So we want to choose vertical align center, and you'll notice that all of my center points are now aligned and my teeth are all aligned. And then we also want to use this distribute objects, which allows us to distribute them evenly. So you'll notice that some of them have more space in between than others. And so we would probably want to distribute it from that center point. So again, we're going to choose horizontal distribute. And when you click that, you'll notice that now all the spaces between those teeth are exactly the same, which is what we wanted. Okay. So now we actually want to cut this in half. And the reason we're doing this is because obviously we could create like single teeth and we could duplicate them and rotate them and everything. But it's a lot easier to just create, for instance, I have 6 teeth here. It's just a lot easier to create 6 of them and then cut them in half. And how we want to do that is the same way we kind of placed a shape over top of this and cut it off of there using the minus front. We're going to do that with our teeth too. However, I don't know if you remember, but a little bit ago I said that with the Pathfinder tool, you can only use 2 shapes at a time. So what we need to do is we need to create a compound path. Okay, so a compound path is when you take multiple shapes and you don't really change them, but you are changing what the computer interprets them as. So when you create a compound shape from multiple shapes, what you're doing is you're telling the computer that those multiple shapes are just a single shape. So in order to create this compound path, we're going to go up to where it says object. Then you're going to go down to where it says compound path, make. And you'll notice that nothing actually happens on the screen. But if I click off of my teeth and then I click on again, you'll notice that they're all selected this time. So before we had to select them individually, now they're all selected at the same time. So that's how you know that the compound path is made successfully. So if you don't create the compound path, when you go to go to choose the shape modes, this is not going to work. So what we need to do now is we're going to choose the rectangle tool and we're going to draw a line across where we want to cut the teeth in half. So I'm going to move mine down a little bit because traditionally your top teeth are a little bit larger than your bottom teeth. Maybe that's a little too much. And then I'm going to select both that front rectangle that I just created. I'm going to hold down the shift and create and select my teeth, which should all select at one time. Then I'm going to choose that second shape mode again, which is minus front. And what should happen is that everything that was covered up by that rectangle should disappear and I should end up with a bunch of teeth separate from one another. Okay, so now because we created a compound path and we used the Pathfinder, all of these teeth are now grouped together. So if we wanted to edit them individually, you would want to select them and go to Object, Ungroup. And so now each one of these are back to being their individual options. So for instance, I could make one tooth a little bit smaller than the other, and maybe this tooth becomes a gold tooth because that's pretty rad. And so now is our opportunity to kind of start modifying our skull the way we want it to be. So I'm going to fill in my eyes with black by changing the fill, so you can select it and change your fill. I'm going to also change my nose to black because those are all going to be things that are going to be in shadow because they are filled in. I'm going to go to my stroke and I'm going to increase my stroke. And if you remember, I'm also going to change my profile. Although for some reason, I have to have my stroke alignment in the center. Otherwise I can't change my profile. So I'm going to change my profile to this one and then maybe increase my stroke a little bit. So you can see that that already makes it look a little bit more interesting. All right, so I've got my eyes and I've got my nose and I've got my teeth all happening for me, and I've got my skull. So we did say we were going to make skull and crossbones. So we have to think about what shapes we're going to use to create those crossbones. So the first shape that you would use to create crossbones is going to be your rectangle tool. And then you also would want to use 2 circles at either end. So you would draw 2 circles here. They're usually one size is a little bit smaller or larger, and 2 circles over there. So now we want to put all of these together, and we're going to do that by selecting everything. And then you're going to choose the dead snowman, also known as the shape builder tool. And you're going to go ahead and just scribble through all those shapes. You have to make sure that you get every single one of them. And it's going to create a single shape now, which we can then select with our selection tool, and we can rotate it, and we can hold down the Option key and duplicate it and rotate that one and make sure that they're crossed. And if you want to cross them a little bit uneven, or you can make it perfect, it's up to you. This is, you know, you're going to get to have some artistic say in this. So now we've got a problem because, well, we can put these together. So you can select both of these and you can choose your dead snowman or your shape builder tool, and you can draw through those. And now this is one single option, so which is nice because that means that we only have to select that, and we can increase the stroke and change the profile of it on here, and it will be all one. But the problem is that you'll notice that our crossbones are actually covering up our skull. So what we need to do is we need to send this behind our skull. So as you create things in Illustrator, they automatically put them one in front of each other. Every shape that you create goes in front of all the other shapes. So in order to move this crossbones back to the back, you're going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And that's going to send those crossbones to behind the skull. So now my crossbones are behind my skull. I'm probably going to move them up a little bit so I can just see the crossbone part. Now, for some of you, it might be in default that your fill might have been on none, which means that this is what your skull might look like. And so the way to fix that is to just click on the outline of the skull and fill it in with a color. Okay, so you guys have the option to make these skulls whatever color you want. If you want to make your bones a little bit off-white and maybe make your skull a little bit off-white and your teeth white or whatever, you can do that. If you want to add like an eye patch or a bow or something else, feel free to use all the shape tools to add an extra feature to your skull. I also want you to fool around with, there's a couple tools. If you click on the width tool, which I think kind of looks like a corn stalk, you'll notice that there's all these other tools, like a warp tool, a twirl tool, pucker tool, bloat tool, scallop tool, crystallize tool, wrinkle tool. So I'll just show you how this crystallize tool works. It's kind of my favorite because it kind of almost gives the skeleton like a little cowlick or some spiky hair. So you basically just click and kind of move the mouse in the direction that you want the distortion to go. And so I like to use the bloat tool kind of for like my eye a little bit, because like your eye sockets aren't really like the perfect circle or rectangle. So like you can kind of mess around with the shape of your eye. You can also check out the the twirl tool, which does some funky stuff. Yeah, so I want you to mess around with those tools and kind of experiment with them. Don't get too crazy with them because they tend to, like if I select this now with my white arrow, you'll notice how many points and paths it creates. So if you get too crazy with the twirl tool or one of these other distort tools, what's going to happen is your program may crash. Okay, so it's really important that as you're working, you just hit Command Save. And what that's going to do is actually you're going to have to figure out where your document goes. I am going to strongly encourage you guys to create a folder specifically for this class and hold all of your files in there. So you should, when you go to save this file, you're going to save it as an Illustrator file. The reason is that you want to always have access to be able to make edits and changes to an Illustrator file. If you save it as something different, you're going to have trouble later. So I'm going to just go to my desktop, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it, well, we'll call it, I'm just going to call it Jefferson for right now because that's our school, even though it was definitely Philadelphia University not long ago. So I'm just going to call it Jefferson. And so inside that folder, I'm going to save this skull exercise Christine Bailey as an Illustrator file. So down here where it says format, you want to make sure it says AI, and then you're going to hit save. Now, when you're finally finished this, this tutorial, you're also going to save your file as a PDF, and that's what you're going to upload to Blackboard for me. So we're going to just hit OK. So you're going to make any other changes. You want to make sure, you know, this is a design class, so, you know, think about things. Obviously, our skull is pretty rudimentary, but you guys are just learning, so we're not going to do anything overly complicated. But you do want to, like, make sure that you are conscious of where things are placed on the page. Always be thinking about composition. Anything that you add will show me that you guys are interested in kind of experimenting in the program. So then we're going to hit File, and we're going to hit Save As. And this is going to, we're going to go down here to where it says Format. And so we already saved it as an Illustrator file. Now we're going to save it as an Adobe PDF. And these are the, you're always going to save it as whatever program we're working in. So either Illustrator, Photoshop, or InDesign, you're going to save it as that file type. And then you're always going to save a copy as a PDF. And this is what you're going to always upload to me on Blackboard. Unless I ask you for something different, just assume that it's going to be a PDF. And so in your folders, like for, you know, I would probably have a folder for this class, and then for each section that we cover, like Illustrator, I would have a folder just for Illustrator, I have a folder just for Photoshop, and a folder just for InDesign. So we're going to use skull exercise christinebailey.pdf. Now, when we hit save, it's going to be another dialog box that's going to pop up about save PDF. You want to click on where it says Illustrator default, and you're going to choose smallest file size. If you decide that you want to, actually, we're going to save these as high quality print, because in the future I am going to ask you guys to print out some of your projects. So you're going to choose high quality print, and you're going to hit save PDF. You might have something else that pops up and says, you know, just so you know, you got to save this. You just hit OK. And so that's it. So this is going to be our skull. Hopefully, if you guys will be able to follow this tutorial fairly easily. If you have any questions, you can email me. My email is on the syllabus. And I look forward to seeing you in class.